My name's Jack Benson, and a month ago, I thought nothing could ruin the joy I felt booking a dream family vacation. I'd spent 40 years working as a civil engineer in Chicago, raising a family I was proud of. Now, retired and widowed, I craved nothing more than one last adventure with the people I loved most. So I did what any sentimental old-timer might do. I put $21,000 on the line, planning a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Key West, Florida. It was supposed to be a week of ocean sunsets, fishing charters, and laughter with my son, his wife, and my grandkids. It was supposed to be healing, an escape from all the empty chairs and quiet evenings I'd lived through since Carol passed away. For months, my son, Brian, seemed excited. "Dad, let me handle the details. Flights, hotels, all the bookings. You just relax and enjoy." His wife, Sophie, kept sending me hotel options, photos of the beach, and group texts about dinner spots. The grandkids, Lily and Noah, were giddy about dolphin tours and snorkeling lessons. I felt useful and needed. I wired Brian the money, trusting him like any father would. But the morning of our departure, everything changed. The airport bustled with that kind of chaotic energy only big city hubs have. I hauled my battered suitcase through the doors of O'Hare, already smelling jet fuel and burnt coffee. Brian met me at the curb, a little too stiff, not quite meeting my eyes. "Dad, listen, I need to talk to you." His voice was tight, almost rehearsed. My stomach twisted. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. The last thing I wanted was drama before paradise. Brian fiddled with his phone. "There's been a mistake with the tickets. I forgot to get yours. You're not on the reservation." At first, I thought he was joking. "Come on, Brian. We planned this for months. I gave you the money, remember?" He didn't smile. "It's all booked up, Dad. There's nothing I can do now. Look, we have to go through security. The flight leaves in an hour. I'm sorry." It was like being blindsided by a truck. Around us, travelers wheeled luggage, mothers called to their kids, an announcement about a delayed flight echoed overhead. But all I heard was my own heart pounding. I looked past Brian, expecting to see Sophie and the kids, but they'd already headed toward the security line, not even glancing back. I clutched my boarding pass, except there was none. My name wasn't on any reservation. I tried the counter, desperate for a standby seat. The agent, her name tag said Jessica, scanned the manifest. "I'm sorry, Mr. Benson, there's no seat for you, and every flight to Miami and Key West is booked solid for days. Spring break, convention season, there's a wait list for everything." Brian came over again, eyes darting everywhere but at me. "You should just head home, Dad. I'll call you from the hotel, okay? We'll bring you back a souvenir." There was no embarrassment in his voice. No panic. Just relief. As if he'd planned all along for me to be left behind. I stood there in the middle of O'Hare, watching my only son walk away, boarding pass in hand, on a vacation I'd paid for but was never meant to join. My suitcase tipped over. I left it on its side and walked outside into the cold Chicago wind, feeling like the punchline to someone else's joke. I took a taxi home, the city passing in a blur outside the window. The driver was a talker, cracking jokes and asking about my day. I told him the truth. Family left me behind at the airport after I paid for their vacation. He looked at me in the mirror and said, "Sir, sometimes blood ain't thicker than common sense." Back at my quiet house in Oak Park, I poured myself a strong cup of coffee and sat at Carol's old desk, staring at the stack of travel brochures and receipts. $21,000 gone. A family torn. And all I could think was, they didn't just forget my ticket. They'd planned this. But if they thought Grandpa Jack would just roll over and disappear, they didn't know me as well as they thought. Sometimes old dogs still have teeth. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brian's face, the mixture of guilt and relief when he told me to go home. It burned more than any slight I'd felt in all my 68 years. The old house creaked around me, each sound a reminder of how empty things had gotten since Carol passed. My coffee went cold on the kitchen table, untouched, while I replayed every memory I had of Brian as a boy, back when I was the one he ran to for help, not the man he pushed aside. The next morning, sunlight cut through the kitchen window. I stared at my phone, 7 missed calls from Brian, none of which I answered. There was a text from Sophie. "Hope you're okay, Jack. We'll bring you back something from Florida." As if that could fill the hole they'd carved in my heart. I decided to do something I hadn't done in years, stand up for myself. First, I called the hotel in Key West, the luxurious Atlantic Breeze Resort. The woman at the front desk, her accent pure Southern hospitality, found the reservation immediately. "Yes, Mr. Benson, I see a booking for 6 guests, Brian Benson, Sophia Benson, Lily Benson, Noah Benson and—" She paused. "Caroline Benson. That's odd. There's no Jack Benson here." I almost laughed. Caroline was my late wife, gone 3 years now. They'd used her name to fill the 7th slot. My money paid for my dead wife's imaginary vacation, while I sat here alone. It was cruel, almost comical in its audacity. "Ma'am," I said, my voice steady, "I'd like to cancel the entire reservation." She hesitated. "Sir, that will incur a cancellation fee of—" "I don't care. Cancel it all. And please note on the system that it was the primary payer who called it off. If the party arrives, tell them to contact me." After I hung up, I felt lighter. Maybe petty, but lighter. The first real decision I had made since Brian blindsided me at the airport. For the first time in days, I ate breakfast at my favorite diner on Madison Avenue. Old Frank behind the counter asked if I was heading somewhere warm. I told him the truth. "My family went without me, Frank. Left me at the airport after I paid for everything." Frank's hands stilled on the coffee pot. "You know what my father used to say, Jack? When someone shows you their character, believe them the first time." He poured me a free refill and slid over an extra donut. "What are you going to do about it?" I smiled. "I already started." Back home, I dug out the file I'd kept for years. Old legal documents, Carol's will, our marriage license, and the business card of my longtime attorney, Roger Lane. I hadn't spoken to Roger since Carol's estate was settled, but now I needed him for something bigger. "Jack, good to hear from you," Roger said when I called. "What's going on?" I told him the whole story, every ugly detail. Roger was silent a long moment, then said, "You know, Jack, this isn't just hurt feelings. What Brian did borders on financial abuse. You have every right to protect yourself and your assets." We set a meeting for the next day. Meanwhile, I went through my bank records, every transfer, every check written to Brian, every loan that was never repaid. The numbers painted a story I'd been ignoring for years. Over $80,000 sent to Brian and Sophie over the last decade. Mortgage help, new cars, private school tuition for the kids, vacations just like this one. I'd always believed generosity was my duty, the only way I knew how to show love. Now it looked a lot like a weakness. The day of my meeting with Roger, I wore my best navy blazer, the one Carol used to call my serious jacket. As I drove downtown, I rehearsed what I would say. I wouldn't cry, wouldn't ask for pity. I wanted action, real, legal protection from being taken advantage of ever again. Roger's office smelled of old leather and fresh coffee. He listened quietly while I laid out the evidence, emails, receipts, even Brian's text messages about the booking error. Roger took notes, eyes narrowing at the mention of my wife's name on the reservation. "This is more common than you'd think," he said. "Elder abuse isn't always physical. It's manipulation, coercion, exclusion. But you're taking the right steps." He explained my rights. Jack, you can change your will, set up a living trust, restrict access to your assets, and even seek legal recourse if Brian tries anything further. I'll draft new documents. We'll record everything, so there's no doubt about your capacity. It felt surreal, talking about legal defenses against my own son. But I signed the papers. I changed the will. Everything, house, savings, investments, would go to charities and scholarships unless Brian changed. I left a letter for the grandkids, explaining my decision, just in case. Driving home through downtown Chicago, I saw families at parks, kids chasing pigeons while parents watched with lazy smiles. It hurt, but it also felt like freedom. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't disposable. I was still Grandpa Jack, and now, I was drawing the line. That night, I cooked myself a big steak and poured a glass of Carol's favorite red wine. I toasted her photo on the mantel. We did good, honey. Time for a new chapter. I slept well, better than I had in years. 3 days after canceling the trip and rewriting my will, the silence in my house was replaced by a storm of calls and messages. Brian called, texted, and even left voicemails at midnight. At first, his voice was angry. Dad, what the hell is going on? The resort says our booking is gone. The kids are devastated. Call me now. The tone shifted with each new voicemail, growing more desperate. Dad, Lily's crying. We're stuck in Miami and there's nowhere to stay. Everything's booked. Please answer. Finally, he resorted to guilt. You're punishing your grandchildren. Please, Dad. We need you. I listened to each message only once, then deleted it. There was no apology, no acceptance of blame, just the same expectation that I'd solve his problems. I didn't reply. For the first time in years, I let him sit with the consequences of his own decisions. The fourth day, my neighbor Dave, a retired police sergeant, dropped by. He brought a box of old baseball cards, claiming he wanted my opinion on a rare Hank Aaron rookie. I could tell he'd heard something from his wife, who played cards with Sophie's aunt. Word around the block is you're in some kind of family feud, Dave said after a while, sipping his black coffee. I nodded, giving him the short version. Dave listened quietly, then said, Let me tell you something. My brother tried to steal my inheritance after our dad passed. I spent a year feeling like a victim until my wife said, You teach people how to treat you. He slid the Hank Aaron card back into its sleeve. Jack, you did the right thing. Kids or not, respect goes both ways. After he left, I felt lighter. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. In the quiet, I thought about what Carol would have said. She never let anyone take advantage of her. When her sister tried to borrow money for the third time, Carol cut her off. Love isn't about enabling bad behavior, she told me. I just never thought I'd need to apply that to my own child. That night, the phone finally rang with a call I'd been waiting for, not Brian, but Sophie. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. Jack, I'm sorry. We messed up. I don't know how things got so out of hand. He's too proud to say it, but he knows he was wrong. We're flying home tomorrow. Can we talk, just the two of us? I hesitated, then agreed to meet them at my house the next afternoon. I spent the morning tidying up, putting out the photo albums, the kids' drawings still stuck to the fridge. Part of me wanted to forgive, to believe this was the first step toward healing. The other part remembered the cold way Brian had told me to just go home. At the airport. When they arrived, Sophie came in first, eyes red from crying. She hugged me without a word. Brian followed, carrying Noah, who looked confused but happy to see me. We sat in the living room, the air heavy with things unsaid. Brian started. Dad, I'm sorry. I screwed up. I panicked about the booking, tried to fix it by taking Carol's name instead of yours. I thought you'd understand, that maybe you'd rather stay home. I was wrong. He didn't look at me as he spoke. Sophie squeezed his hand, silently encouraging him. I nodded, but didn't let him off the hook. You took my money, Brian. You planned a family vacation and left me behind. Then you expected me to pick up the pieces when things went wrong. That's not how family works. Lily, who had been quiet until then, walked over and sat beside me. Grandpa, why didn't you come to the beach with us? Mommy said you weren't feeling well? I hugged her gently. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, sweetheart. But we can always try to do better. Brian looked up finally, eyes rimmed red. Can we? Is it too late? For a long moment I didn't answer. Then I said, that depends on you. I'm not an open bank account. I'm your father. I want to be part of your life, not just your emergency fund. If you want that too, then we can start over. But things have to change. He nodded. I understand. I really do. They left an hour later, promising to call, to visit, to be better. I wanted to believe them, but I'd learned that trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. That night, I wrote a letter to the grandkids, telling them how much I loved them, how proud I was of who they were becoming. I included a photo of Carol and me on our honeymoon, standing on a windswept beach in Maine, grinning like fools. I wrote, family means showing up for each other, no matter what. I hope you always remember that. I slipped the letter into a drawer, next to my new will, and felt a peace settle over me. For the first time since that terrible day at O'Hare, I knew I'd done the right thing, not just for me, but for the family I still hoped we could be. Life returned to its usual rhythm in Oak Park. For a few weeks, Brian's family kept their promises. Lily and Noah sent me hand-drawn cards. Sophie texted photos from their weekend soccer games, and Brian even invited me for Sunday dinner, grilled burgers in their backyard, the kind of gathering I'd always dreamed of. The kids argued over who'd sit next to Grandpa Jack, and for a while, I let myself hope things really had changed. But trust is a fragile thing, and real wounds take time to heal. One rainy Tuesday, I received a thick envelope from my attorney, Roger Lane. Inside was my revised will, signed, witnessed, notarized, leaving everything to local charities, the public library, and a scholarship fund at Northwestern University. Only if Brian truly changed would I consider amending it. I tucked the envelope in my safe, alongside Carol's letters and our wedding rings, a quiet reminder that dignity mattered more than tradition. Brian didn't know about the changes. I wondered if I'd ever tell him. The next week, Brian called and asked, Dad, could we borrow your SUV for a road trip with the kids? Ours is in the shop, and we can't get a rental. Old habits die hard. I almost said yes, but something stopped me. Brian, I'm happy to drive you to the rental place or help with carpool, but I'm not comfortable lending out my car anymore. Too many bad memories from Florida. I hope you understand. The line was silent for a moment. Then, quietly, Yeah, Dad. I get it. We'll figure something out. I knew I'd disappointed him, but for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. A few days later, I got a call from Sophie while I was pruning the backyard rose bushes. She sounded anxious. Jack, I know things are still complicated, but Brian's been having a tough time at work. They're making cuts at the engineering firm, and he's stressed. He wants to talk, but he's afraid you're still upset. I put down the shears, wiped my hands on my jeans, and said, Sophie, I'm always here to listen. But Brian needs to learn to talk to me honestly, not just when he wants something. I love you all, but I'm not going back to the way things were. That night, I looked through old photo albums. Brian as a toddler at the lake, his first baseball glove, Carol's gentle smile as she watched us from the porch. I realized that letting go of bitterness was the only way to move forward, even if forgiveness would be a longer road. The next Sunday, Brian came by alone. He stood on my porch in the drizzle, hands jammed in his pockets, his eyes uncertain. Dad, can we talk? I let him in. He took off his wet shoes, glanced around the living room, and started. I messed up. I know I did. At first, I told myself it was a mistake. A simple mix-up, but the truth is I was embarrassed. I thought you'd hold me accountable and I panicked. I'm sorry. He looked up, searching my face for anger, but all I felt was exhaustion. Brian, I raised you to take responsibility for your actions. When you shut me out, then expected me to fix everything, it hurt more than you can imagine. I'm not perfect, but I deserve honesty. He nodded. I know. I've started seeing a counselor. Sophie thought it would help. I'm working on being better, for myself, for you, for the kids. That admission caught me off guard. I saw a glimpse of the boy he used to be, the kid who ran home with scraped knees, looking for comfort, never afraid to ask for help. We sat in the kitchen, drank coffee, and talked for hours. No money changed hands, no requests, no hidden agendas. Just a father and son, rebuilding something fragile and real. As he left, Brian paused at the door. Dad, I hope one day you can forgive me. I know I have to earn it. I'm going to try. After he drove away, I sat in Carol's old rocker, listening to the rain tapping the windows. I thought about family, not the storybook version, but the messy, flawed reality. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't a gift you give for free. It's a promise to try again. That evening, Sophie called to thank me. Jack, whatever you said, it made a difference. I haven't seen him this hopeful in months. Thank you for not giving up on us. I smiled, feeling a flicker of hope. We're family, Sophie. That means something. But next time, you plan the vacation, and I'm double-checking the tickets. She laughed, and for the first time since that awful morning at the airport, the sound didn't hurt. I spent that night at peace, knowing tomorrow would still bring challenges, but also a chance for healing. The sun would rise, the roses would bloom, and maybe, just maybe, the Bensons would find their way back to each other, one honest conversation at a time. Summer in Oak Park always brought with it a feeling of renewal. Maybe it was the long, warm evenings, the smell of fresh-cut grass, or just the sound of kids laughing from backyard swing sets. For me, it was the season of second chances, a chance to see if all those conversations with Brian really meant something, or if they were just words fading like fireflies at dusk. A few weeks after Brian's visit, my doorbell rang on a Saturday afternoon. I opened it to find Lily and Noah grinning up at me, arms full of wildflowers and a handmade Grandpa Jack's Day card. Behind them stood Brian and Sophie, looking more relaxed than I'd seen in years. We were hoping you'd come to the park with us, Sophie said. We packed a picnic. Just family. No strings. Something in her tone reassured me. I nodded, grabbed my Cubs cap, and joined them. At the park, I watched Brian push Noah on the swings while Lily showed me how she'd learned to cartwheel. Sophie laid out sandwiches and lemonade. There were no tense questions about loans, no whispered worries about money, just the gentle ease of people trying, honestly, to rebuild. During lunch, Brian looked at me. Dad, I wanted to thank you for standing your ground. If you hadn't, I'd still be making excuses. Counseling is hard, but it's helping. I've started talking about things I bottled up for years. Mom's passing, work pressure, even how I felt when you got sick last winter. I don't want to hide things anymore. His honesty stung in the best possible way. I saw the same kid I'd taken fishing on Lake Michigan, determined to do better, even when the water was rough. Sophie reached across the picnic blanket, squeezing his hand. We're trying to teach Lily and Noah that families mess up, but we fix things, too. You showed us that. The words meant more than I could say. I found myself telling them stories about Carol, stories I hadn't shared in years. How she once snuck a kitten into the house during a snowstorm, or how she'd laugh so hard at game night she'd snort. Lily and Noah hung on every word, and even Brian wiped his eyes when I finished. After lunch, Noah tugged at my sleeve. Grandpa, Will you come to my soccer game next week? You're my lucky charm. I promised I would. And I meant it. That week, I started to feel something shifting. The phone calls became more frequent, but never about money. Brian would ask for advice on his home repairs, or send a photo of Noah's latest soccer trophy. Sophie would text about a new recipe she wanted to try with me, or ask for help in her garden. One day, Brian called out of the blue. Dad, I know it's not the ocean, but would you like to join us for a weekend at Lake Geneva? No fancy resorts, just a rented cabin. Our treat this time. I hesitated. Memories of that failed Florida trip flickered in my mind, but Brian sensed it. This time, you're the guest of honor, he added. I already double-checked the reservation. Your name is first on the list. I want you there. We laughed together, really laughed, for the first time in months. The weekend at Lake Geneva felt like the final step in our healing. We played board games by candlelight when a storm knocked out the power, grilled hot dogs on the porch, and went for lazy walks along the shore. I taught Lily and Noah how to skip stones. Brian and I stayed up late on the porch, talking about everything from baseball to regrets to hope. Sunday night, as we packed to leave, Brian surprised me with an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dad, I can't change the past, but I can promise to do better. Thank you for teaching me how to be a man, not just with your words, but with your actions. You stood up for yourself, and for me. I hope I can do the same for my family. I hugged him, tears running down my face. I missed Carol, wished she could see us now, fumbling toward forgiveness and connection. But in that moment, I felt her presence, soft, steady, proud. Back in Oak Park, I met with Roger Lane one last time. I showed him Brian's letter and told him about Lake Geneva. Is it time to change the will again? He asked, a smile tugging at his lips. I thought for a long moment. Maybe. But not yet. Trust takes time, and I want to see what my son does with this second chance. Roger nodded. That's wise, Jack. And fair. That night I wrote another letter, this one to Carol. I set it on her side of the bed, next to her favorite book. We're healing, I wrote. You'd be proud of your boys. I'm not alone anymore. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that second chances, like summer, can't last forever. But for now, I was grateful for every single day. Autumn crept into Oak Park with its golden leaves and chill evenings. Life settled into a quieter, steadier rhythm than I'd known in years. The wounds in our family were healing, not gone, but finally, honestly tended. One Thursday, I found myself sitting on the metal bleachers at Noah's soccer game, hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets. The wind off the field cut through me, but the warmth of having my grandson wave at me from the field made it worth every shiver. Sophie brought hot chocolate in a thermos. Brian joined us, late as usual, face flushed from running straight from work. For the first time, I felt like I truly belonged again, not as a bank, not as an afterthought, but as Grandpa Jack. When Noah scored the winning goal, he ran straight into my arms. You're my good luck charm, he shouted, and I felt 10 years younger. After the game, Brian suggested we all go out for pizza. Over gooey slices and clinking soda glasses, we laughed about Carol's famous hockey puck, meatloaf, and how I'd once accidentally glued my hand to a birdhouse. The kids shrieked with laughter, and Brian looked at me with gratitude, not expectation. Later that week, I started volunteering at the local library, just as I'd always told Carol I would after retirement. Shelving books and reading to second graders didn't pay, but it filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The librarian, Mrs. Patel, always greeted me with a smile. You have a way with the children, Jack. You remind them of their own grandfathers. I began to realize that family wasn't only the people we shared blood with. It was everyone we helped, everyone we showed kindness to. One evening, as I walked home under a canopy of crimson and amber leaves, my phone rang. Brian again. But this time, his voice wasn't anxious, it was excited. Dad, I got promoted. Project manager. More responsibility, better hours. I want to celebrate with you and the kids. I felt pride rise in my chest. Congratulations, son. You earned it. He hesitated. And Dad, thanks for believing in me. I know I gave you every reason not to. When we gathered at their house that Friday, Brian insisted I sit at the head of the table. Sophie cooked a homemade meal, pasta with sausage and peppers, garlic bread, and Carol's apple pie recipe, which, I'll admit, she improved upon. After dinner, Noah and Lily put on a puppet show, giggling behind the couch as they reenacted the story of the grandpa who saved the day. The ending was silly, but the message was clear: I mattered. My place in their lives was real and earned. Later, as the kids slept and Sophie did the dishes, Brian poured 2 glasses of bourbon and sat across from me in the living room. Dad, I need to ask you something hard. Do you still have me in your will? He met my eyes not as a supplicant, but as a man ready to accept the answer, whatever it was. I didn't lie. Brian, after what happened, I changed things. I had to protect myself, to make a point. It wasn't easy. But I left a path open, one built on trust, not just forgiveness. Brian nodded, swallowing hard. I understand. I deserve that. All I want is to earn your trust back. Not for the money, Dad, but for what it means to be your son. That's when I knew the journey was worth it, that the hardship and hard boundaries had given both of us something we never would have found otherwise: a genuine, adult relationship, not clouded by debt, resentment, or expectation. That night, before I left, I told Brian I was proud of him. Keep doing what you're doing. I'll talk to my attorney soon. Walking home beneath the streetlights, I felt Carol's presence as sure as the autumn wind at my back. I whispered, We made it, honey. Your boys finally found their way. Winter was coming, but my heart was light. The first snow fell in December, blanketing Oak Park in white and reminding me of old winters spent building snowmen with Brian, his mittens too big, his laugh echoing through the quiet streets. Now, all these years later, the snow seemed to wash the world clean, a fitting end to the year that changed everything. I kept my promise and met with Roger Lane, my attorney, before Christmas. We sat in his book-lined office as sunlight streamed through frosted windows. Roger listened patiently as I recounted the months of slow repair, the effort Brian had made, the trust rebuilt step by step. I want to amend the will, I told him. Brian is my son. I want him to know he's forgiven, but more importantly, I want to reward growth. I want a provision that he and the kids inherit what's left, but only if our relationship stays true. If the old habits return, the money goes to charity. Can you put that in writing? Roger smiled, nodding with understanding. That's the mark of a man who loves deeply but wisely, Jack. I'll draft the language. And I'll include a letter from you, in your own words, so there's no doubt about your intent. That night I wrote the letter. I sat at Carol's desk, her favorite fountain pen in hand, and let the words flow. Dear Brian, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, but it also means you lived up to the second chance you asked for. I want you to know how proud I am of the man and father you've become. Life gave us rough seasons, but you did the hard work to change. Never forget, money comes and goes, but love, honesty, and family are what truly matter. Take care of your family. Help others. Live with dignity. And remember, your mother and I are always with you. I tucked the letter with my will, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. Christmas that year was the best I'd had since Carol passed. My house rang with laughter, the scent of cinnamon rolls, and the chaos of grandkids tearing through wrapping paper. Brian surprised me with a photo album titled New Memories. Inside were snapshots from the park, Lake Geneva, birthdays and soccer games, plus a final page left blank, labeled The best is yet to come. We gathered around the piano, Sophie played. Brian sang off key, and the kids made up silly lyrics. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own family. I felt essential. Later that evening, as the fire crackled low and the kids slept upstairs, Brian sat beside me. Dad, I know it's not easy to trust after everything. But I want you to know, I won't take it for granted again. I promise. I clapped him on the shoulder, unable to find words, but knowing he understood. New Year's came and went. The calendar turned, but for me, the most important change had already happened. The distance between my son and me had closed, not by accident, but through hard, honest work. The old wounds still scarred, but they no longer defined us. Sometimes, when I walked to the library or had coffee with Frank at the diner, people would ask if I had any regrets. I'd think of all I'd lost and all I'd found, and I'd answer honestly. Regrets? Maybe a few. But I wouldn't trade the lessons learned for anything. Boundaries saved my family. Forgiveness gave us a future. By spring, I'd started gardening again, coaxing new life from the earth. Lily and Noah became my helpers, Lily labeling seed packets, Noah digging with determination. Brian joined us on weekends, sharing laughter and stories. One afternoon, as we watched crocuses push through the soil, Lily asked, Grandpa, will you teach me to build a birdhouse this summer? I grinned. Of course. And this time, I won't glue my hand to it. They laughed, and in that moment I felt the fullness of life, a family tested, changed, but never broken. If Carol could see us now, I think she'd smile. So if you're reading this, if you ever feel alone, discarded, or betrayed by the ones you love, remember, standing up for yourself doesn't mean you stop loving your family. It means you teach them how to love you right back. And if you're lucky, like I was, love will find its way home again.